So, welcome. We are probably this is probably the I don't know 20 or 30th time that we've offered educating the Black child. Um, but it's always like really special every time we do it. And so each time we're able to have a new guest to bring us, new information and new insight. It's always really exciting. I'm Candace Wicks Davis. I'm the co-owner and CEO of Edutainment for Equity, or E for E Consulting. You might hear that term too. And I want to just go ahead and take us down our path this morning. First of all, we want to acknowledge our partners, our sponsors. The Department of Children, Youth, and Their Families has been a very close partner of educating the Black child for quite some time. And so we want to acknowledge their partnership and their commitment to having this really important conversation. Hey. All right. So, educating the Black child is an interdisciplinary conversation about the future of Black children featuring experts in education. For us, it's really important that we bring you all a wealth of knowledge and information from folks who are practitioners, but who also have studied the field as well. So we absolutely have to start off with a land acknowledgement. And if I can get the music cut for the land acknowledgement, because we want to like really have some intention as we talk about this. Um, we want to acknowledge that we are on the ancestral land of the Ohlone people who have been here for centuries, who lived and birthed and died and created and children and families and societies, and who really whose energy is still pulsing through this land. So we want to recognize the Ohlone people, and no matter where you are, if you can take the time, because I know some of you are in different states, to take the time to just think about who is on this land that you live on, who's indigenous to the land that maybe your house is on or that you work on, the streets that you walk down, whose land it was before colonization, and to really honor and respect and be grateful for the space that we have here. And so it's an honor and humility that we acknowledge in the San Francisco Bay Area, the Ohlone people. The next thing we want to do is to call in our ancestors. Y'all that have been to educating the Black child several times, over the course of the last few years, know that we are all about calling in the ancestors in this work. So we want to take the time to do that. And I want you to think about like who is an ancestor, and it can be someone that's in your bloodline or someone who is just someone who inspires your work. Think about who that person is. Think about their energy. Think about why they inspire you. Think about what they did for the world. And I would love for you to drop in the chat, um, their name, just their names. I see Audre Lorde in there. Yes, Audre Lorde just had a birthday. Toni Morrison as well. Thank you. Let's just drop those names in the chat of ancestors that inspire us, that keep us going, that make us want to do this work, that left an impression on our hearts. And we want to be sure that we're choosing ancestors who are ancestors who have passed. When we call energy into the room, if we call living ancestors, we don't know what we're doing there. We might be calling them, into the space, and they're using their energy somewhere else. So we want to call them in. I see James Baldwin. I call him a lot in my work for his compassion, and his honesty, brutal honesty, and also his hope. Yes, I see some great. Thank you all. How wonderful. Look at all these people that we can call in, because we're never really alone in the spectrum of time. We're never really alone in the spectrum of time. Thank you. Yes. Yes, yes. Keep them coming. Even as we move forward today, if somebody stands out to you, bring them in. And then I also want us to think about what kind of ancestors do we want to be? Who do we want to be to the next generation? What impression do we want to leave for them so that they have something to aspire to? What are the sacrifices that we're willing to make because there were sacrifices made for us? To hold that energy as we dive into our conversation today, I want to introduce Hadari Davis, who will be hosting or be our MC today. And he's going to set the tone. He's going to introduce our guest for today. It's a very special edition of Educating the Black Child because we got some poets in the house. It's about to crack. It's just about to crack. But I wanted to introduce Hadari Davis, who is the co-owner and chief communications officer for Educating the Black Child, and he's also a my boo. All right.
Name. My claim to fame is to be your boo. Everybody to Educating the Black Child. We're so happy to have all of you here as our guests. Want to talk a little bit about a famous ancestor, Carter G. Woodson, who is considered to be the father of Black history. He was the inventor of Negro History Week, which became Black History Month in his honor. I think that there's a lot of ridicule, a lot of things that are said about Black History Month, and the fact that the month is 28 days, the fact that it's the shortest month of the year, etc. People put a lot of things on Black History Month as if it's somehow less than, minoritized, inferior. And so I think it's important to understand where Black History Month came from, that Carter G. Woodson named February because it was the birth month of Frederick Douglass. And I think that's an important thing to note, that Frederick Douglass at that time was considered to be the penultimate leader of African American people, the penultimate leader of Black people. So Black History Month being named in February was primarily in honor of him. It was also an honor, ironically, and kind of reflective of this spectrum of freedom in America. It's also in honor of Abraham Lincoln's birthday, which is also in February, because he signed the Emancipation Proclamation. He was so honored during Black History Month as part of Carter G. Woodson's vision for what it meant to bring history into the future, to bring the past into the future. Those who have no record of what their forebears have accomplished lose the inspiration from which comes the teaching of biography and history. So just to recognize, I know it doesn't happen at every Black History Month celebration, but I think it's important to honor where it came from, the ancestor whose mind birthed this idea. And here we are, many, many years after his passing, still celebrating his legacy. So in that spirit, I want to acknowledge Carter G. Woodson. We're going into this great conversation. We have a fantastic guest. And as usual, before we introduce our guest, we want to provide some context for where we are. So we're dealing with a new America, allegedly. It's America with a president who's willing to take a shot. It's an America with a president who's prioritizing fights against racial injustice. It's a president who's at least paying lip service to recognizing institutionalized systemic racism and trying to find and establish systems to address that. One of those systems is getting COVID-19 vaccinations to people. However, we're still seeing an inordinate amount of suffering in Black communities. Our suffering is not just related to our life expectancy, but it's also the result of incredibly neglectful and ignorant policies from the previous administration under the leadership of the former Department of Education head, Betsy DeVos. And we cannot say that Black children are better off now than they were 4 years ago before she took office. We wish we could say that, but we cannot say that. This is kind of a representative chart to get a sense of who the victims of coronavirus have been. And we see that the overwhelming amount of faces that we see on this chart are Black faces. And that's the truth of the virus. That's the truth of the crisis. It's also impacting schools, closing schools. There's a lot of talk about schools reopening, but all of that is connected to vaccines, variants, etc. Children are still at home, struggling with internet access. Some have the access to actually take advantage of the current education system. Many don't have the access. And so there's people like DCYF and other organizations who have been working tirelessly over the past year to kind of build that bridge to mitigate the crisis as it relates to internet access and school access. We're looking at projections of math scores and reading scores as a result of the crisis. And again, I don't present these things in the context of this is the deficit. I present these things in the context of this is the crisis that America is facing. And we know that if America is facing a crisis, the people who end up suffering that crisis most are more often than not Black boys and Black girls. Here's the criminalization of Black men and boys as it relates to this hood, this idea that because of what you wear or where you are, no matter what state you're in, this uniform puts you in jeopardy of being killed by the police. 78% of coronavirus deaths among children in the United States, Black, Latinx, and Indigenous American. We could go on and on and on. Child teen deaths per year. We could go on about poverty. We could go on about many of the challenges and crises that Black children are facing that are actually, they're facing these crises to no fault of their own. They're facing these crises as the results of policies that adults passed, as a result of a culture that adults are perpetuating. We also have glorious things to talk about the future of Black children. We have a growing pride movement among Black people that is expressed in the hairstyles and the clothing styles and the things that Black children wear. We have Black parents who are actively taking a role, not only in raising their children, but also in reading to them and raising literacy levels of their children. There are new books being written that target Black children, that are designed to inspire Black children to elevate their own consciousness. And then there's programs pioneered by our guest and many others around the country where Black men are actually embedding themselves in schools and in learning communities and in alternative learning spaces to address the literacy needs, to address the cultural needs of our community. And then there's people like Caleb Anderson, who, you know, we hear a lot about the violence. We hear a lot about the deficit. We don't hear a lot about Black genius. So here's this 12-year-old who has been accepted at Georgia State University, is going to major in aerospace engineering. And he's already a sophomore at a technical college, 12 years old. So that's to say there are these stories of genius out there. And for some reason, we don't hear them enough. And we want to change that in some way. We want to highlight people like Caleb and the success stories of organizations that are really doing the work to highlight Black genius. So we're not panicking, we're planning, we're pivoting, we're working on looking at this crisis, and also at the same note of seeing the challenges, we're also seeing the opportunities. And we see the deficits, we also see the possibilities. We see suffering, and we also see triumph. And this story, today's story, is really about that triumph. And we're going to start with this video that will help contextualize the work of our guest and also provide some context for you about the conversation we're going to have today.
When you look at the history of this country, Black children, Black people, Black consciousness, the Black physical body, the Black spirit is under daily assault and daily attack. And so we posit if we focus and are intentional and unapologetic around the needs of black children, it actually will empower and engage all children and all families.
One of the big questions that is asked within the curriculum is, how do I see myself? And schools oftentimes give an answer to black boys. See yourself as having a Black History Month. See yourself as in the lower track classes. So for us, this is not just a job. This is a necessity.
We can predict educational outcomes based on your gender, the neighborhood you live in, and the ethnicity. That is racial inequity at its finest.
It's important for people that do this work to come with that same sense of urgency.
I know we will have moved the bar to the next level when public schools across the country actually move beyond 10th grade ethnic studies courses. Now is the time really to lean into these institutions and rewrite a whole new narrative.
We just wanted to be clear that this is about the love of black boys. This is about the love of our children. This is about giving our lives as best we can to create a new world for them.
Black boy, better listen close. When your elders speaking, better have the most respect, and I'll teach you how to get it. We ain't always gotta act like opposition. No, I got the wisdom, I'ma share it with you. If my life a movie, once you in the picture. If I got some time, I can kick it with you. Chop it up, tell me what's been on your mind. Pardon my absence, we back on the grind. Get in the jump on them, don't fall behind. Breaking down barriers one at a time. I'll give you the game to strengthen your spine. Aiming for greatness, don't settle for fine. Men on a mission, don't step out of line. Vision is vivid like king in his prime. I got a dream, we all sending divine. Peace in the streets, no heat for police. Mom and pop send love, check cash every money. Work piled up, resume on fleek. Got my passport stamp, motherland next month. Every move that I make ain't average, bro. Come now, king, let me sign you up. Built a whole castle for you to run. Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, make it happen right here. Like king. What is hate for this fire that I bring? What I speak is in my veins, in my genes. Right, wrong, stand strong in the scene. In between, what you mean, what you mean? King. What is hate for this fire that I bring? What I speak is in my veins, in my genes. Right, wrong, stand strong in the scene. In between, what you mean, what you mean? King.
All right, all right, all right. So we have CEO of Kingmakers of Oakland, educator, activist, administrator, entrepreneur, author, and father. We like to call him Baba Chris Chatmon. You might hear me say Baba Chris a few times. This is Chris Chatmon. He is a champion in the communities of Oakland, California. He is a model for leadership around the country with regard to addressing the needs of Black boys in particular, Black children, Black families, Black communities. We are so honored on this February in this Black History Month to be not only to have Chris as our guest, but it's not often that you have somebody who's had a heroic life to be present in this kind of conversation. But Chris is one of those people who 20 years from now, 50 years from now, they'll be talking about the work that he did in this time for Black people. And he'll be one of those faces that we see on murals in cities. So we're just honored to have him here. And welcome to the conversation, brother. Welcome to the spot.
Give thanks, Baba. What a amazing moment. And I know our ancestors are just smiling in the spirit of our journey to be in conversation right now in this space. So I'm honored, I'm humbled, and just want to recognize you and Sister Candace for your love, your light, your unconditional leadership for our community, for our families, and for our children. So I'm honored just to be in the space right now, brother. So thank you.
Right on. I want to, it may not come up fully in the conversation, but I do want to mention that you grew up in San Francisco and that you're very familiar with sort of not only the history of that experience of growing up during that time, but also how San Francisco is a bit different now from what it was when you were growing up. A lot of our guests are people who are providing service in San Francisco, and I think always in this conversation, we're thinking about the Black children, the Black youth in San Francisco. So I think it's just something to mention that you're from the city. You're not you're not just talking about the city from the outside, but you actually were made by this area. And I think that's an important thing to acknowledge.
Right on. Well, definitely acknowledge Deloitte and Shaw, my mom, and my dad, Herbert Joseph Chatmon. My mom was a retired San Francisco Unified School District teacher for 35 years. Taught at George Washington Carver Elementary School, San Miguel. Yeah, no, I was around when there was a vibrant Black community in the Bayview, Hunters Point, the Fillmore, Sunnydale, Visitation Valley, and yeah, there are not as many of us in the city, but it's important that we know the history, the legacy, and we should always feel prideful, given San Francisco is the international city because of the contributions of extraordinary Black folk, both past and present. And so honored to be raised in and also have taught at Thurgood Marshall High School when it first opened. Taught at Balboa High School, and at San Francisco Day School, I ran a program called Summer Bridge as well. So the experience of public school, I'm a product of having taught, but also dipped my toe and my feet in the independent school experience to see when resource isn't an issue, the sort of extraordinary access to education that the privileged folks in the city have access to. I also got exposed to that as well. And so now honored to be in community with folks from the city. And Kingmakers of Oakland is working with San Francisco Unified School District now, the African American Academic Leadership Initiative, Ali. And so still doing work with the city as well. So thank you for acknowledging that as well.
That's fantastic. We're going to talk so much about the work of Kingmakers and really about some of the books that have been written about the work that you're doing. But I want to highlight this quote from Dare to Love. It's a quote from you about how you start conversations about Black boys and kind of the context that people think from when they're thinking about Black boys. So this quote, you said, I wanted people to consciously begin to think about and identify what is a profile of a successful African-American child, and what are we doing to create the culture and conditions that lead to all Black children experiencing that success. If you're not thinking about that or talking about that, and all you do is talk about the deficit, all the behavior, then that is what you end up cultivating and perpetuating and priming other people to think that's all they can do. So I think that's a great starting point for our conversation. And let's talk about that. Let's talk about, how do we prime positive thinking about the future? How do we prime optimism? How do we prime resistance to anti-Blackness and resistance to racism? How do we prime that in our conversations about Black children?
Yeah, well, we got to talk about it. We got to experience it. We got to, subtly disguise the vegetables, be audacious with it. I mean, from my virtual setting, right? Khalil, or I should say Khalil, Anthony, Willie, Solomon, Ricky, and Toussaint. So that's priming. We live, white supremacy and Eurocentricity is fully baked into this nation, where our coming even into our understanding of who we are and whose we are is through English language, right? And it's through these systems and structures that have normalized failure within this nation and definitely within the school system. And so we have to be audacious and really continue to come up with the vision of Black genius, of Black joy, and Black beauty, and then reverse engineer and ensure that that everything that we're doing in this productive struggle is priming, is modeling and mirroring Black excellence. Even if we haven't manifested it now, we got to show Black genius, because what ends up happening is in public school systems, we normalize mediocrity, we normalize the problem of practice, as opposed to the building and accentuating and calibrating around the promise of practice. And so not only are educators and administrators perpetuating that, but it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And children then, given that's all they hear from the content, that's all they're manifesting in that, it limits the opportunity for them to be creative and imaginative just based on the adult's inability to have that audacity of Black excellence and Black beauty. And so, Black history is every day and appreciated, the opening, but it's really on us to do that. And so that's the beautiful struggle of just, trying to be around people that are perpetuating, cultivating the narrative. I mean, I believe whoever controls the narrative in this country, or on the block, in your house, in the school, in the hood, also has the power. So we have to be very, very intentional around the words we use, around our how we're living, because our children are, peeping game 24/7, 365. And so it's important that, we create new music, create new art, lifting up, the legacy of our forefathers, foremothers, because schools don't, they don't do that. And yeah, when you do lean in, systems of oppression self-correct, and they tend to purge that level of audaciousness and audacity of Blackness. So no, that's why it's important for the work y'all are leading, and the folks that are on this call or on this Zoom, to be able to every day share, the Black excellence and Black beauty.
So let's talk about this Black excellence right here. And let's get a sense of, a simple question is, what is Kingmakers of Oakland? But I think the story is in the name. But tell me what you would say as a definition. I have a couple of slides about Kingmakers, but go ahead. And what would you say? What is Kingmakers?
Yeah, I mean, we have the formal definition. I mean, ultimately, Kingmakers of Oakland works with public school systems to improve educational outcomes of Black students. In several instances, Black boys. In other school districts, it's Black students, male, female, and gender neutral. But ultimately, it's to improve educational life outcomes for Black students from preschool through 12th grade, while reimagining and transforming the system, the structure, the condition, and the culture through a process that is called liberatory design, which means that the complexity of addressing and dismantling white supremacy, there's not a linear it's not a linear solution. That the solution really lies in the domain of complexity, and that and the way to drive the process of reimagining that system is including those folks furthest from opportunity, and they drive the ideation and the prototyping. And so I say that to say, when we work with districts on identifying a cross-functional intergenerational team, really led by Black students, Black parents, Black teachers, as well as systems leaders, then to ideate and drive, well, what does a system in service of Black children look like, sound like, feel like? And we take them on that journey, which really is a 5 to 10 year journey. We don't come in as Kingmakers, fly into any neighborhood and do the work. Really, we believe that communities have what they need. It's really a matter of organization and will. And too many times we let the challenge of resource it keep us from leading, and then that's where we got to know our history and our her story, because our forefathers and foremothers dealt with far less, and so when we look to that history, we know that resource won't be that holds us back. It's resource. And so that's the work that we do with districts, and we model that. I have more young people on my board than I have folks over 25. For every person over 25 on payroll, I have equal to someone under 25 on payroll. And so really, I'm looking to work ourselves out of a position to hand the baton to that next generation. And so, that's the work we're in. We haven't figured it out, but I feel the work that we developed in Oakland for 10 years now has really been a blueprint for a process that we're now working with districts across the country on.
That's so powerful. for a lot of people, it's hard to remain optimistic. You know, it's the challenges sometimes can seem insurmountable. There's a professor by the name of Michael Dumas who talks about schools as sites of Black suffering. And he highlights anti-Blackness as a pollutant that toxifies the environments where our children go to learn. So let's talk about the toxicity and the role of the work that you're doing to address that toxicity.
Yeah, and this slide kind of helps capture and so let me be clear that toxicity, we can't run from this as Black people. I don't care how much money you make. I don't care if you go to independent schools, charter schools, urban, suburban, or rural. The one constant is the more melanin you have in your skin, the harsher that system will react to you. And so it's important that built environment is based on a legacy of Eurocentricity and white supremacy that is fully baked from the policy. It's fully baked in the structure. It's nested in the condition, which from our people, the cure should be in the culture. But in actuality, the culture is toxic. And it's really taught us to bury our crowns in our hat. And so what we do is really do two things. We inoculate our kings, right? Ain't nothing wrong with Black children. But we need to inoculate them while we address these systems, these structures, the culture and condition. And so the toxicity is the harsh discipline and the policies. We have policies on the books that perpetuate the expelling Black children, brown children, indigenous children, right? Those policies need to be scrubbed, rejected, and purged. We know that disproportionately in this country, not just in San Francisco, that went into a full consent decree for violation of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act for disproportionately suspending Black boys. San Francisco ain't no different. Oakland ain't no different. We just negotiated something a little bit different when I was leading it. But actually, 20 years earlier, the district was sued for what? Disproportionately suspending Black boys. But districts across the country are doing what? Suspending Black boys disproportionately, as well as referring Black children into special ed for emotional disturbances. No different than when I went to school in the 70s and my desk was put in a coat closet. I associated kindergarten through 5th grade with getting paddled because in my era, a spirited child had to go grab the paddle about this long as my desktop, and then hand it to the teacher, who would then whack you in front of your peers to get you to maintain. And so I say this to say, this has just been a generational assault on the Black psyche, Black spirit in schools, but protected and bound by policy. Unequipped teachers. We got too many people that mean well, but are perpetuating the normalization of failure, who are perpetuating their own implicit and explicit isms on Black children because of this society's framing and priming around anything that's associated with Black is dirty, wrong, and bad, and white is lightness and good. And so we get into that, and then teachers not knowing that the culture, that the origins of humanity originate in Africa, and the academic rigor, that the excellence is not just in Black history, but in math, science, language, arts, and history, and all of our elective courses. But because teachers don't understand that, they can't bring that genius into the classroom. And so what perpetuates the toxic ecosystem are the vast majority of teachers. And not to poo-poo on my teachers, because I too was a kindergarten through 8th grade teacher and a high school teacher and a former principal. But we have a lot of work to do as teachers to unlearn white supremacy and then to relearn Black excellence, the legacy of Pan-Africanism, indigenous studies, Rasa studies. So that's another domain that adds to the toxic ecosystem. And then real short, just to complement that, Eurocentricity is fully baked in the content, the curricular standards, and the curriculum from preschool through 12th grade in every public school in the system. And until we evolve out of 10th grade ethnic studies classes or one Black studies class to rewriting curriculum from a Pan-African standpoint, from a Rasa study standpoint, from an indigenous standpoint, from preschool through 12th grade, then we're still perpetuating Eurocentricity and white supremacy. And lastly, the discrimination and criminalization from negative, again, and I talked a little bit about this, whoever controls the narrative has the power. And the narrative right now is one that, again, perpetuates this negative frame. And so this system we've created privileges white folks, and it disadvantages, or it is a toxic system for Black folk. And so that really is the school to prison pipeline. This is why we check out as folks of color as early as 3rd grade, and why the literacy rates are what they are. And so that, in terms of the toxic ecosystem, that's kind of how we get. But the school system was never designed, if we understand the history of public school education, it was never designed for students of color, that they would rake a few geniuses from these particular neighborhoods of color that would access this. But all of that needs, in particular during the multiple pandemics, this is our opportunity to lean in and not go back, but to be audacious with our vision, to speak truth to power, and not wait on these systems, but do what you all are doing, what we're doing, and other folks are doing across the country.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is really interesting, also because I feel like the after school space, the out of school space, is really also in a lot of ways dictated by what happens in the school space. And so a lot of the toxicity that often exists in the school space, punitive discipline policies, the ignorances that the leadership has, or those who are in the position to be educators don't necessarily know the students that they're teaching or the communities that they come from. I just see a lot of the toxicity that's in schools kind of replicated in after school programs and in alternative learning spaces and in out of school spaces. Even though those spaces tend to have perhaps more leverage to actually intervene in ways that teachers or administrators or schools maybe feel like they can't. What do you think about that?
What saved my life wasn't public school. It was youth development. It was the Boys and Girls Club. It was actually the Boys Club at Ernest Ingle and the Bayview. Actually, it wasn't the Bayview. It was in the Haight-Ashbury. It's now gone. But it was going to Camp Mendocino. It was Park and Rec, where I had access to brothers that knew how to engage me, encourage me, and empower me. It wasn't public school. I do look to some of some of the most innovative ways to engage students really is in youth development, but the structures that fund it and legitimize it in terms of the traditional metrics of the oppressor, you're pigeonholed in youth development as well. And so ultimately we have to fund our innovation and continue to change policy and hold folks accountable. But if we look to the oppressor and philanthropy to fund this work, we're just going to hit that wall. And so I think we always have to have that inside-outside game of how do we innovate and sustain that innovation through our own resources and network and network, whilst continuing to penetrate and break this system, right? And part of my tension, having been an entrepreneur for the last 30 years in systems, was, you can innovate, but systems of oppression always self-correct and they outlive all dynamic people. So you got to have an inside game, but you also got to have an outside game. And the investment, we have to continue to figure out how we invest this movement. And we can't look to capitalistic corporate philanthropy to invest. What ultimately is going to get them is a redistribution of power, of resource, of network, of all these different things. And so I say that to say, that's the journey I'm on, but there's innovation and excellence within the system and outside of the system, but the narrative doesn't look to lift and shine a light on those innovators. It always, it's always on the negative or what we're not doing, and glosses over the folks that are really doing the work, and you really don't know unless you're really doing the work. But no, that's what I would have to say, knowing that I think the other piece is the kind of mirror window work of we can't look to anybody to give us permission and or to validate. I mean, for me, I am clear that I'm doing the work of ancestors. So my ego, I got to take the E out of ego so I go forward. And in order to lead, I got to let go and pay attention. And so in order for me in this next journey is I got to make sure this physical edifice is paying attention to what the ancestors have left us on multiple domains, so I can carry it forward. And in the legacy, I'm thinking and building who are the next 10 kings that are replacing me as the CEO? Who are the next 10 kings that are replacing me as the CFO, as the CTO, as the CO? Like it's if you're not thinking about the how we're every door we're knocking down, how we create more opportunity to give to the next generation, then we bought into this capitalistic hegemonic power structure. And it's really about how are we creating more for our communities so they can go farther faster than us as well. And so that's the journey that I'm on and we've been on, Baba, just from Panthers baseball to all our iterations. And so I think when we also align with like-minded, spirited people too. Even when we fail, we got folks that are helping us out, helping our children. So that creates something that's far bigger and greater than ourselves. It is the community. It is the legacy of our elders. It's the spirit of Ubuntu that knows that I am because we are because I am, and may the circle be unbroken, that our strength is in our support. But we're nested into a structure that is an opera singer mentality of me, and I. And that's so counter to indigenous thinking, to Pan-African thinking, but we don't know what we don't know. And so I'm still trying to unlearn and align with brothers and sisters like yourself and people on this call.
So let's go to the interventions, this kind of kingmakers, key drivers towards systemic change. And as you're talking about this and the things that you said, I know they're resonating with our audience. I also want to think about what are some of the practical things that they could do within their programs, within their daily interactions with Black children that that help to drive towards at least, if not systemic change, maybe an individual change for one Black boy, you know?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, we have to remember we're planting seeds that will grow to be trees that will provide shade for children we haven't even met yet. And so for me, the daily practice of every time you see a king or a queen, be it in your house, be it on your block, be it wherever, greet them with a smile, salute, embrace them with love. This society is taught us to frown, to walk away, to cross the street, to arms up, to put the dukes up versus the arms out. And we have to unlearn that. And so I think so it is that daily reflection and what can I do different to show and manifest love for Black people, Black children. And so, and for me to continue to unlearn and be aware of, again, man, they're hitting this hard on so many different levels. So first we got to start with self. And then the pieces that I'll talk to formally that we do, this is based on 10 years of work within Oakland Unified School District. Not that Oakland figured it all out, but we showed and saw significant improvement in the ecosystem we call the public school system. And schools don't operate independent of municipality, of not-for-profit. So we also have to be aware that this is really community work on a whole nother level. And so the drivers, these 6 areas that we go deep and we go broad in working with systems. One is around culturally relevant pedagogy. And so again, it is paramount that this society teaches us that we don't even know we come from kings and queens, that many times we think our history starts within slavery, when in actuality, again, we come from greatness. And so the idea of culturally relevant content is very important for us as Black people, but important for everybody as we're preparing children to work in a global economy. The reality is folks of color are the majority. And if we're going to work in a global economy, we have to know the contributions and the significance of Pan-African, of API, of indigenous, And our schools are not wired or designed that way. And so the culturally relevant curriculum is about rewriting curriculum aligned with ESSA and having learning standards and academically rigorous, but through the lens of Blackness, brownness, and API-ness, so, and indigenous. And so that is a domain in and of itself that we work with districts on. Black male teacher recruitment, training, and retention. We know, and the data suggests that that any child that has a Black male teacher, a conscious Black male teacher, actually will benefit. And so we work with districts around recruiting and training and retaining Black male teachers in these systems as well. Because people, a lot of times folks, oh, there's no Black male teacher. There's Black male, there's so many extraordinary Black male teachers all around us. And many times we don't want to go into these systems of oppression and teach the white man's content because that's it. So with that, it takes a level of understanding and grace to understand that this is what we have to do in one domain and penetrate that system because our children need it, but all children need that. But I say all this to say recruiting, training, and retaining Black male teachers is a driver and a strategy. The third driver, which we all should be tethered with, is around youth voice and leadership. And this really came from our work in Oakland when I launched the work, and having been a teacher and youth development all my life, what I found myself asking was, hey, man, can I get a brother on your leadership group? Hey, can I get a king on this leadership? And I said, you know what? Forget asking. I'm gonna create my own student leadership council. But for every decision that impacts the life of a Black child, Black children should be at that table. And one of our foundational principles, you either at the table or you're on the menu. And so it's making sure that as we as adults are curating and talking about Black spaces and the lives of Black children, that we also don't want to design and ideate without them at the table. So youth voice is important because really that should drive the work as well. Narrative change, I talked about that one. And then policy, too many times we talk about just changing policy, but culture eats policy for breakfast. And so policy is important, but if we're not building out these drivers to permeate and cleanse that ecology of the public school system, then really what binds these practices and these structures is the policy. And so you need that, but you need these other things. And that's the work that we do with Kingmakers of Oakland and a few other areas nested in that, but I'll stop there for now.
No, I think that that's powerful. I know that, when programs, first of all, when any program highlights or kind of focuses on one specific group of people, in this case, Black boys, I actually think that more often than not, programs, when the focus is on Black boys, there is often a practice of whataboutism that comes as a result.
Absolutely.
I think that because Black boys tend to be the group that receives the least amount of service and hyper criminalization, there's almost an assumption, why do they get that and we don't have that? Like, it's almost as if Black boys should be the last to receive functioning programming, rather than be pioneering programming that could actually provide insight for other communities, other groups to be intervened. So I just find it interesting if there was a program that was specifically for Black girls, I don't know if the question would come up all the time, what about Black boys? But I do know that it's a question that you get often, is that, what about the girls? And perhaps it's the language of emphasizing kings, and sort of when you do the work of creating counter narrative in terms of images, language, art, etc., that creates a counter narrative, you have to highlight who you're talking about. You have to, elevate the actual subject of your conversation. And so in that elevation, others may feel marginalized, or they may feel silenced, or they may feel like that's not in your intention to address. So maybe you could speak a little bit to not only how these drivers lead to systemic change for Black boys, but also how they just impact Black communities and Black families, regardless of whether or not, regardless of gender. That's one context. And then another context is within the emphasis on Black boys, do you find it difficult to meet the needs or to address the challenges of boys who maybe identify differently, either on a gender plane or identify differently in the context of their own racial identity? I don't know if any of that question made sense, but
it all makes sense, and it speaks to the complexity of the times as well. So a few responses, given that it definitely is a complex question and a valid question, right? So first of all, our focus on Black male achievement doesn't mean that it should stop anybody else on focusing on Black girls, on Latinx students, on Indigenous students. The idea, and again, Kingmakers of Oakland was born out of our work that I started in Oakland 10 years ago, as African-American male achievement. And so the reason why Oakland Unified School District and the focus was on Black boys really was the data. And so let me be clear, a couple of things. One, you can't have African-American male achievement without African-American female achievement. The context of the strategy is nested in this frame called targeted universalism, which posits you go to those furthest from opportunity, the folks that are being most severely impacted. And in 2009, when you looked at all of the positive academic indicators within that ecosystem, we call it the city of Oakland and Oakland Unified School District, all the positive indicators and all the negative indicators, Black males were either at the top of the negative indicators or at the bottom of the positive indicators. And so the idea of designing and driving your sets, your ideation, and you're creating your solution sets was moving that group into the center, listening to them, and then ideating based on that group with the trust in knowing in doing that, a rising tide raises all ships. And so I say that to say it was never to isolate, because in our work in Oakland impacted Black girls, and I later went on to get the board to approve us adopting African-American female excellence. And then we adopted and created a department for Latino student achievement. Then we created a department for Asian Pacific Islander student achievement, which speaks to the complexity and the nuance of this system is assaulting all folks of color, in particular the more melanin. But let me be clear, in the spirit of my journey, I have to be intentional and unapologetic around the needs of Black children, Black boys, and in our districts, San Francisco, African-American academic leadership. It's actually, we don't, in terms of our support is for Black students. So if you identify, and it's not for us to say, if you, in this sense, the school district, whoever identifies as Black, in this case, they have access to these said supports. It doesn't stop our leaders within the Brown movement to do work, because what's happening to our Indigenous and Latinx students is equally egregious. And so we should be leveraging the support that maybe we have at the moment on how, as we open the door, come on with us. How do we co-design and create shared space to learn with each other? Because this system has us embracing this kind of this oppression kind of Olympics of, and it's our strength is in all of us coming together, but we lose each other when we go to trying to be all things to everybody, and then no one benefits. And the system's designed to support. It's interesting. We don't bring this same tension to white students who this whole nation is built on, and how they have all sets of supports financially, healthcare, all. So, but then we want to get real granular when it comes. And so all that to say, I don't really engage in that. There's space and resource for all of us to advocate and support. But so we don't isolate, we just stay focused, knowing what the data showed in Oakland based on a 10-year longitudinal study was there's a spillover effect. In our work focusing on Black boys, actually, there was an improvement in achievement for Black girls and Latin students, Indigenous students as well. And so these sort of strategies, targeted universalism, actually benefit all. So it's not meant to isolate. The other domain that I just want to say in my own journey, given I grew up in a different time where in my kind of understanding of male, female, there wasn't necessarily an acknowledgement or a language around they, them, or gender neutral. As we've evolved, we want to create safe space. So how kings, queens, or however young people identify, that ain't for us to say. We want crazy that if you Black, then if wherever you are on the spectrum, this should be safe space. And so let us help you manifest your greatness and understand what our forefathers and foremothers have done for us to manifest that. So in the spirit of gender neutral, we do have, and not like we so it's not, we are evolving to create safer space and to ensure that anyone that identifies within the Pan-African kind of worldview, that that they can see themselves in this domain. So we're still evolving. Our street team is probably the greatest example of Black representation that represent male, female, and gender neutral youth that are helping inform how Kingmakers will continue to evolve as an organization and continue to influence the drivers that I shared earlier. So we'll continue to evolve, remain dynamic to the needs of folk, but we're still learning and growing as well. But it's really a matter of creating safe space for Black students, Black people. Our entry point was and is Black boys, but we are dynamic enough to evolve in spaces that are ready for it. Because then most folks aren't even ready to talk about Blackness, let alone other dynamics of how folks see themselves.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I think part of the narrative of Kingmakers or of AAMA is in the language that other people use to describe the program, not the program itself, or not the way that the young people describe it. And I know my experience, especially with AAMA, we've had young people who identified as queer. We've had young people who were in the process of transitioning or understanding what that meant to transition. And definitely AAMA and Kingmakers has played a significant role in supporting not only African-American female excellence in Oakland, but supporting Young Gifted and Black, supporting many other youth organizations that are the Black Sheroes, like organizations that are not just wholly centered on Black boys specifically. And I also really appreciate the superordination of Blackness and kind of the subordination of the things that divide Black people from each other. Finding ways to actually place an emphasis on those things that bring us together. So I think that's really interesting. And this image to me is really powerful. I know some of these boys.
Yeah. Go ahead.
And boys don't identify in any one particular way. They're not all one person. They're in these African garments, but they all represent different faces and aspects of Black masculinity. And they're not even all what we say heteronormative, and they're not all even coming from the same economic environments or the same social environments or the same cultural environments. Some have two parents, some are raised by their grandparents, some are raised by two moms. People have different circumstances out of which they're coming from. And so this picture, to me, there's a power in this picture, not just in kind of the uniform nature of we're all Black boys, but there's also, and obviously shifting the narrative of what that looks like and what that means. But I think that there's a nuanced narrative in this picture of the diversity of Black boys. Even in the midst of being dressed in the garment of Blackness, there's still this diversity, which I think you spoke to a bit in your in what you said last. So yeah, I just think that's powerful. I think we don't always, when we imagine Black boy, this is not the image that comes to mind.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, and the other piece is when we think about Black excellence too, the society only it's kings in suits or black men in suits, and in actuality, a Black genius is kings in hoodies, kings in dashikis, kings in Black genius ain't defined by the exterior. It's our mental disposition. We represent as light as cats like myself to as cats that are as dark as some of my other brothers. It's like that. So with that though, like taking the cuffs off, locking in just a certain image of what Black excellence is. And so for us, just the story of this, Brother Dean, who's the tall brother in the back with the glasses, actually goes to Nigeria and has a sister who he literally does our measurements. And then there's a sister who hand makes our dashikis that we did for 3 consecutive years. So this is just one particular year. And it's important in the spirit of the power move that our kings, we buy them suits, European suits in terms of the business, and we buy them Nigerian dashikis, and we represent in multiple domains. And it's such a trip because people don't even know how to deal with us. They're like, well, who you guys are? They think that we're an athletic team when we're like, no, we're an academic team. And they're like, and we are stopped at airports. And so it's because this is not, we haven't normalized this. We don't even know how do you deal with that. And so for us, it's just, we got to saturate, normalize these images, in particular, this country, urban, suburban, East Coast, West Coast. And so it's a powerful picture taken at Remember Them, which is actually 30 leaders, civil rights leaders. And we spent the day just taking pictures, and the number of people that were just stopping by during this particular photo shoot, just wondering who we are. Like, no, all these kings go to Oakland Unified School District schools, and like you said, represent the diaspora in such a beautiful way. And so, yeah, I mean, I think the imagery is important, and we try to pay attention to that too, because it causes us to question or ask good questions, and then look in our own mirror, but also look out kind of outwardly into how this country perpetuates white supremacy and limits us on our skewed view on what Black excellence may look like, or what Blackness may be. So I appreciate you showing this picture.
No, I think it's powerful. I know a few of these boys. I know the story. I've traveled with many of these young men, and there's a chef. There's a chef in there. There's like a basketball player in there. Like, there's a cat who fights. Like, there's a fighter in there. I just think it's powerful. It's very powerful. The conscious Black man. I think that the word man is and boy in that emphasis is challenging for people. I think that because the nature of the conversation around men and boys is expanding and it's evolving, and the sort of the spectrum of our own identification of what it means to be a man, and just how that word has been used over time. Even man has in some ways become a bad word, right? It's associated with toxic masculinity. It's like, if you have a manhood development program, what are you teaching them? You know what I mean? It's almost,
we get that. Man up conferences.
Yeah, it's like, why are you so man? So I don't know, speak to that. Speak to kind of because to me, there's when I hear it, I don't see it and hear it from the lens that other people are seeing and hearing it. So for me, I see that picture of the men walking with the signs that say, I am a man. And you know which picture I'm talking about during this movement. And I think that for a lot of people, that if that same sign was held at a protest today, it might not be received in the same way. So what does it mean for a Black boy, or what does it mean for a Black man to claim manhood? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, no, I mean, and it's, culture is not static; it is dynamic, and as you even said, men and women, there's an evolution in how we see each other, and I think in my evolution, not that I have a right way, and am I stopped? I think in my evolution, a man is the manifestation of the balance of feminine and masculine energy, that is able to take responsibility for self, his words, his actions, his community. No better, no worse than anyone else. I mean, there's some physiological differentiation. Yet, I won't get. It's really about responsibility and the manifestation of masculine and feminine. And so, in my evolution, as and it's for me, we did 19 man up conferences, right? And people would hit me, and it's such a trip. Like the folk that would hit me would the man up, and it was a trigger for them. So that wasn't for me to debate. But I'm like, did you ever go and actually see 200 beautiful Black boys eat well, practice yoga, be engaged with 50 to 100 Black men? And so although I was clear with what we're doing, in the next breath, it's important for me to understand the trauma, and where other folks are coming from. And so even and now in Kingmakers, we're not even going to continue the Man Up conference. We want to evolve in something that is more inviting, knowing that for us in our journey of supporting our kings and queens and gender neutral folks, is really about, it's a balance of that energy, be it if it's in some cultures it's two-spirit energy. It's like, and so with that, your energy is your energy. That ain't for me to judge. But now, how do you take responsibility in that energy? How do you take responsibility for your children, the children of the community? How do you ensure that folks in your community don't go without? And so for me, the question is more about one of responsibility for self, first circle, and community than it is around the complexity of the physiological differences of man and woman. I'm just like, it's really about taking responsibility however you see yourself, and how do we hold ourselves accountable, and how do we hold each other, and loving people. However you see yourself, I love you. And that, to me, I don't get caught in my evolution. So it's not for me to define others. It's for them, for me to, for us to create space where they can help work, how make meaning of that through Blackness. And I'm still learning what that means. So it's a dynamic, transformative process, but it's around safety. It's around understanding that, just that complexity. So I think that those are my responses. Appreciate it. Not that, again, that we figured it out, but I'm still, as a 53-year-old Black man, raising sons, and with my wife of 24 years, and we've gone through all of our seasons. That we're still learning, we're still growing, and we have a lot more to learn too in this space. And you have to listen to know how to evolve and update your formulas, right? Because what we grew up in the for me in the 70s and 80s, times have changed. And so I want to make sure, though, that our people feel safe and know who they are and whose they are. So that's how I would approach them.
You jumped in. You got something to say? What you got to say?
What you got? I think that, and I sent out a newsletter about this, so those of you who are on our mailing list got this, but I think this conversation is so important because we have to understand the differences in positionality for Black men and white men, and that the way that Black men exercise and embody maleness is not the same as white men. And we can see that in the statistics very clearly. Who's criminalized, who's disenfranchised,
That's
who's
right.
left out, who's incarcerated, who's murdered, who's starving, who's suffering. We all see that, I think even more so now, we're really starting to see it in this time of racial justice and really calling those things out. But we have to know that just because a Black male is male does not mean that they are without experiencing oppression, deep systemic oppression. And so at the same time that we really are trying to push and nudge, Black men in understanding their role in misogyny, their role in sexism, their role in those systems of oppression on women, and Black women in particular, that we also have to own the complexity of the intersectionality of Black and male, because it's different than white and male. And that means that this group, because they are a disenfranchised group, that voice is imperative to the conversation around equity. The voice of Black men and Black men and Black boys require, it is essential for there to be interventions that are specifically for them. And Black women need to have specific interventions for them. Black trans women, Black trans men need specific interventions. And so I think when I'm looking at the questions, because there are a few questions in the chat about it, I think it's a valid question. Where is the space for trans leadership, transgendered young people? I think that having known this program since it started, I think I was at the data reveal that y'all did
Yep.
forever ago, but that at that time the conversation around gender and sexuality was not as evolved, not nearly as evolved.
That's
I don't
right.
think I had heard the term non-binary at that time, or the idea of misgendering. None of that was really a part of the lexicon at the time.
That's right.
And so I think that as we have evolved, we're going to start to really see um, data being collected, and I think we are seeing it because we're hearing about, the Black trans folks that are being murdered at a super higher rate, right? And I want that to have an intervention that's like targeted energy to that, because it deserves that. And all of us and all of the intersections of our identities require their own intervention, and not that if you are a cisgendered male that in Black that you don't need intervention, or that there should be less for you because you are sitting in a position of privilege as a male. It doesn't work that way. When we look at intersectionality, we do need to do a better job in general around intersectionality in the Black community. Absolutely. I think that's something that we have to work on. But understanding that every person in a Black body needs intervention
Come
in
on.
the world. And because I've probably been to 14 different countries. Every every Black person in this world needs intervention, regardless of any other factor, any other part of their identity. So I just wanted to say that.
No, I appreciate that. I think also what's also often lost in these conversations is history and context. So the word man doesn't mean the same for anybody. Like, especially in the context of the United States of America, it used to be illegal for a Black person to call themselves a man, or to be treated like a man, or to expect treatment as a man. And what were we saying when we were saying man? We just wanted to be citizens. We just want to be free. So, the nomenclature of the word man, it doesn't even have the same definition in every community. And that's what I was getting at with those signs. It's like we had to protest to not be like at 53 years old. You say 53 and I'm 51 years old, and I'll say it used to be I couldn't call myself a man at 51. Like, in certain parts of the United States, I'll go to those places, they'll call me boy to this day. They'll call my father boy, and he's 79 years old. So just thinking about the context of the word and the words that we're using, I don't think that people have often perceived man as being an act of resistance, affirming your manhood as an act of resistance. And so when I hear Kingmakers of Oakland, or when I see African American male achievement, that's what I see. I see an affirmation of humanity, and like we're not perpetually children. And then teaching that to the boys, and that's why that image was so powerful. Teaching that to the boys, teaching them that they have a power and a light force that's needed in educational circles is so important. It's so critical. If they don't have models, I know one of your famous quotes used to say all the time, if you can't conceive it or believe it, you can't achieve it. I don't know if
That's
I got
right.
it right, but I do know that it's a powerful sentiment. If you've never seen what respect looks like, if you've never seen what dignity looks like, if you've never seen what it looks like to be respected, to be treated as a human being, then you're going to dehumanize. You're going to be a product of dehumanization, and you're going to continue to replicate dehumanization. And so I think in as much as it's it's the African American Human Achievement Initiative. I really feel like that. But to say that would affirm that, you know, somehow somebody else's perspective on us was somehow right. So I just think there's a power in both of what you've both said around this. But I think there's even a greater power in contextualizing these words through history, through Black history, and not just leaving them in the context of the now. Because what man is in 2001 is not what it was for Carter G. Woodson. Like, it's not what it was for Carter G. Woodson. So cool. Candace, you have something else to offer for us? You got something else for us? You're gonna stay with us. Please stay with us.
Oh, I'm gonna hang out. Yeah, I'm gonna hang out.
That makes me happy. This picture is powerful. It made me think about how much of your work, Chris, as an educator is influenced by your role as a father.
Absolutely. I mean, a couple of things. When I've been working with children since I was a child. I learned how to stay at summer camp longer, was to figure out a way to work with kids at camp, and I could stay at camp longer, and really and kids always called me on my bullshit. So in the spirit of, I could not fake the funk with young people. But the blessing was when you learn to love other people's children and then you have your own. Wow. I mean, it's amazing on so many different levels. And so for me, it's a pleasure, a privilege to have Amari, Khalil, and Jordan, because they also hold me accountable in ways that no one else can hold me accountable, and ask questions, because they were born out of love. They've been in everything that we've been a part of. So it's not like I was doing one thing and sent them other places. Like, no, when I was in, wherever, East Oakland at East Lake YMCA, they were in after school programs. West Oakland, they were all came up out of Man of Development. They were in YGB. They were in Panthers baseball. And so I say this to say now, in the spirit of, my sons will check me in a way that I love, and I can hear in a way that I'm still evolving and growing. And so what a beautiful scenario to have a relationship with your sons. And then Romero, who's the king over my right shoulder, is my boss now. Romero was in 7th grade in that picture. Now he's on my board, right? All these kings are actually Trey is on our street team. And so I say this to say, in the spirit of, we are who we associate with. And so that's why I love y'all. I mean, Hadar, you were at my wedding 24 years ago. We continue to evolve as dads, as men, as brothers. And I also know, having young people in my life that I poured into on certain levels are pouring back into me, but are pouring back in the community on so many different levels. And so that's what it's all about. So I just, for me, it's what a gift, right? To be at my age and to have this dynamic relationship with my own sons and with the sons of our community, locally and nationally. It's just a gift. And so I love that. I learn from them. They keep me relevant. They keep the work relevant. And now my goal is to acquire land, acquire property, positional authority, to build social capital and expand my network so I can give it all to those kings and those pictures. So that's where I'm at right now. Is just, I want to get ready, and it's nothing like going from the system, and now I got 24 Black people on payroll that are all aligned with this mission, with the intent of that. That's really the legacy work. And so these are the folk I'm building with, or have all been in the movement. And so that's kind of my response to the blessing of the journey.
That's fantastic, because what we're about to see your sons. So I wanted to set that up. Kingmakers, we also have this guest artist, one of the features in that video, Khalil Chatmon. Are you in the house? Woo!
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Here from Kingmakers of Oakland. What I have to say about Khalil Chatmon, he's one of the founders of Young, Gifted, and Black. Believe it or not, he's like original YGB cat from like the 4th grade. He's made 3 international trips as a poet and performer, to Trinidad, to Ghana, West Africa. He is a media director, yes, for
That's
King.
a media coordinator for Kingmakers of Oakland.
He's an incredible young man, a great student. He goes to Sacramento State University. This is the dude I look up to. So I want to introduce you to Khalil Chatmon. What you got for us, brother? Give what you got.
I appreciate you. Thank you. It's a blessing to be here. Once again, my name's Khalil Chatmon. It's an amazing conversation. Just happy to be able to bless you guys. One thing I do want to give a little context before we start. This piece kind of stems from a project that Kingmakers started with a handful of youth, really inspired by or was a reaction to the double pandemic that we experienced as a people. The uprisings, the protests as a result of the deaths of or the murders of Ahmaud Arbery, of George Floyd, of Breonna Taylor. And so we created an EP or a short album and a short film to really be a response to that. And a lot of that was rap. And at the beginning of our short film, I did an intro and just want to share it with you guys today. The conversations with our elders have prepared us for this moment. A testimony to generations of hurt and rage ignite a fire within the Black spirit that transcends their understanding of this world. Who am I if I don't harbor the resistance and the passion of Huey, of Angela? Who am I if I don't walk with my brothers like Martin or fight for my sisters like Malcolm? Who will we be if we don't sacrifice our comfort for the sake of what's sacred? For that is our burden to bear. The challenge we inherit. Our dream deferred, but this struggle allows our light to shine. This unity and this deeply rooted love provides us the armor we need in this battle for justice. I can hear the voices of those who gave me strength and knowledge and understanding. I remember the lessons, the stories, and the history, the fables, the faces, and the families. We marched to the same rhythm, a collective heartbeat, guided by connection, my people, rising and thriving, living and loving. I am because we are. Thank you.
Woo! All right, that's that heat. You're gonna stay right there real quick. That's that heat, Khalil Chatmon. Wow. There's, everybody's clapping. Khalil.
Appreciate you all.
Question for you though, before you bounce out. Can you talk a little bit about your experiences? Just, I don't know, what are the challenges and triumphs that have brought you to the point where you feel empowered enough to carry the spirit of your ancestors in a poem like that and really do the work that you're doing with Kingmakers and with the community?
Wow. I feel like it's not necessarily a loaded question, but I got a loaded answer for you. My whole life has prepared me for moments like these, to lead, to be a part of movements, to listen, to give, to help, to serve. Just being a part of YGB at a young age, being a part of community at a young age, understanding what Ubuntu means, understanding what responsibility, what accountability means. And then, yeah, just kind of growing up and having a knack for reading and studying and loving our history and loving our people. A lot of that is inspired by you and my pops and Yai and all of my ancestors, my elders, my teachers, my professors. Like, I think all of that played a big role in where I am today. And then kind of coming into my own as a young man, having a real passion for our ancestry, a real passion for our history, really wanting to teach that and become a real student of our history. I feel like that drives most of my action. A lot of things that I'm passionate about, the art. I'm teaching at an elementary school, helping out teaching kindergartners. So on that track right now, I feel like everything is aligned in that fame, that fashion. And so for me, I feel like it's really just an accumulation of all of the things I've been a part of in my life, with all of the amazing people in the revolutionary city of Oakland. I feel like it's just prepared me for the road that I'm on.
Based on the kind of challenges as they kind of present themselves in the news for Black boys, or the things that you're aware of or conscious in terms of the history of the struggles for Black boys and for the Black community in general, do you feel optimistic about the future? Like, is your perception of your future a life full of struggle and fight, or do you see, like, where's the joy in your kind of future vision?
Yeah, I mean that I do think one, that's an amazing question. It's something that Black youth gotta think about. I think far too much. If I dedicate my life to kind of being an activist and fighting for my folks, do I sacrifice? You know what I'm saying? The joys and the fun times. But I mean, like I say in my poem, that's part of being Black. That's part of who we are. That's part of our ancestry. Is enjoying making the best of our situations. But speaking to where we're at directly with our just Black boys, I do understand that we fight multiple battles. And one of the battles that we fight is fighting ourselves. And I do feel like a lot of the struggle of survival for Black boys, like I do feel like that is a big obstacle, but a lot of our community work is to undo that and then create a unified front. And for me, like I don't feel like that has a lifelong timetable on it. I feel like that's something to where if we get our community going, if I get my brothers going, we could get these brothers going, and then everybody's moving to the same rhythm. So just how movements are built, just how people are put on the same collective will, the same basis. I feel like if I have the opportunity to do that, then it's not necessarily a life filled with struggle and just marching and fighting. But yeah, I do feel like it has a lot to do with unifying the brothers in our community, the sisters in our community, and helping and serving the ones that we see every day and the people closest to us.
Wow, let me get all the guests back in the house, and let's get Candace back, let's get Baba back. You gonna hang with us, Khalil? Don't leave. Um, Baba Chris, can you talk a little bit about that piece about I'm a King, and why you produce these records? Like, what is that about?
Yeah, it goes back to whoever controls the narrative has the power, and corporate hip hop has really had a man. We grew up, Hadari. Hip hop saved my life. My introduction into knowing who I wasn't through public school. It was through KRS-One. It was through Public Enemy. It was, and so, but then at some point, white supremacy got infiltrated that, and then perpetuated a certain narrative of self-hate, of misogyny, of all these things. And so, as opposed to poo-pooing on it, what we do is let's introduce something new, right? And position our kings who have voice, who have something to say, and basically create a platform where music, we can introduce our positive, I think our vision, values, our approach through the lens of our kings, speaking truth to power. So they can get a little money. We can actually bend this narrative and really kind of counter the toxic kind of negative stuff, and shine a light on, for me, it was, again, when Mos Def and Black Star and Talib too. I mean, it was like hip hop evolves, but yet what tends to get perpetuated is the negative pieces. And so all this to say, for us, it was another entry point into shine a light on Black joy, Black genius, and our kings, and just tell a different story. And so it's a way that we use the music for professional development. We use the music to actually inform folks who don't have authentic experiences with Black children, to kind of prime them and engage them a little bit differently. And so that's part of it. And then welcome, Khalil. You may have some takes on that one as well in terms of that. Given he's been on both projects, and we have a film that's about to drop that, man, it's going to be powerful. And really, it was the youth who drove the film. We have the two documentaries. The first documentary, which is Kings in the Making. The second one is around our documentaries around Kingmakers of Oakland. The third film, which hasn't been released yet, is the Revolution Remix. And it takes the 4 songs that are on that EP, but shares it through the lens of where this country is, but told through the lens of Black children and Black families. So that'll be pretty powerful as well.
Yeah, Khalil, in terms of this music, how are the young people receiving it? Is it because most nonprofits aren't really cool? Like, you know, I was part of a really cool nonprofit for like 15 years at Youth Speaks, and young people would flock to us because we were cool, you know, because Bamuti would do a little dance and somebody might say some poetry, and then Most Def would show up and bust, and we'd be like, oh, Youth Speaks. So how is this, though, in terms of, you know, for a lot of young people, nonprofits do projects like this and they're considered to be corny. So what have you heard about this? How has this project been received from your perception?
Yeah, I do think, and it's an interesting parallel that you make to Youth Speaks as well. I do think a lot of it has to do with how driven these things are by youth. A lot of times, I know Spokes had a big influence in a lot of the people that you wanted to get over there. So a lot of the times with Kingmakers, things are king driven, king led, king centered. So I mean, for me, it's like if we want to put an album out, we got to put kings together to get the album out. So it's really the population of people who are listening to the tracks that are out, to the popular rappers that are out now, and really we just want to saturate the market with Blackness. I mean, we don't want to like recreate the wheel or recreate a sound, but we do want to make it hella Black. So it isn't like we're imitating things that are happening on the radio or anything like that, but it is recognizing the sounds that are popular, recognizing what students are listening to in the class, and really just wanting to counter that in terms of the content, but making sure the sound is still there, making sure it's still fire and that they're still enjoying it. So yeah, every meeting we get on, every forum we have, the lab, like we play our music every single time, get great reactions, see students bumping their heads. So yeah, we really try to emulate the feel of the culture, the vibration of our people within the music and within the sound, and really it kind of grows legs from there.
Yeah, I think it's powerful. I think it slaps. I'm an old man though, but I think it slaps.
For sure, appreciate it.
And I bump both records all the time. I love having something that I can bump for my 2-year-old and not feel like I got to turn anything down. I love watching him dance to the Kingmakers and, you know, start repeating the words. I think that's beautiful. You guys are also doing some really innovative things on Instagram, and I don't want to stop this conversation without talking about this, because I feel like it's not a tool that a lot of nonprofits are using. It's not a tool that a lot of education organizations are using. Kind of Instagram as a platform for youth voice, Instagram as a platform for Black story. So can you talk, both of you, can you talk a little bit about this? I'm really interested in it, Chris, from a system standpoint, like why? And then Khalil from a kind of perception standpoint on the other side, because Instagram skews young. It doesn't skew like Facebook does. So,
well, maybe I'll start just the frame. So when the pandemic hit and schools shut down, and they were already struggling with engaging Black children and Black families, we launched, based on our values, a street team, and basically just we created a space with a group of young folk who were familiar with us, informed Kingmakers on how do we remain relevant when the normal way of engaging youth was school or after school. And so the idea of leveraging IG really came from Instagram, was the street team, and they led for 40 consecutive weeks a podcast, but on Instagram, and it was for youth, engaging young youth, just to remain relevant. So it was a way to a strategy for us to understand our normal touch point of schools. We didn't have that anymore. So we had to get be dynamic. And who I didn't look to the research. I didn't look to cats our age. We went to the young people and and then we listened and basically I'll pass it to Khalil.
Yeah, no, I feel like with any one of these topics that we're talking about, whether it's music, whether it's curriculum, or just reaching kings and queens, I feel like having things driven by youth is going to get it done. So Kingmakers really took the approach to Instagram, found that if we have our street team kind of host these conversations rather than wanting adults to do it or looking at anybody else to do it, we're just going to take what we want to talk about, take it to IG Live where we know a lot of people are real active, and get some folks who we know are going to talk about something. So people were having their friends on there. People were having assembly women, council women. I know we had a brother Amin who would just ask anybody. I mean, we would show up on a forum. He would see somebody like, "Hey, can you show up on the IG Live?" And that was really a way for us to inform some of our homies, some of our friends who follow us on social media, and a lot of people who follow Kingmakers. So it's a way to inform the community, keep the community engaged, and to create networks and keep people in the loop. So it was really beautiful to see it work, and actually see it take off. And then, yeah, we were able to create Crossroads, which is super awesome. B. DeVoe, an amazing individual. Icky Davis, Akira, shout out my sister, and Amin Robinson were able to create a show called Crossroads, the intersections of Blackness, really addressing some of the things that you all were talking about earlier in this conversation. That the intersectionality of Blackness, number one, but also understanding that Blackness, we exist on a spectrum, and it's that we have to address conversations and have conversations where we're inviting all, where we're incorporating all, and where all are welcomed. So yeah, I'm super proud of them for creating that platform, and we were able to host a myriad of other very important, vital conversations with a whole host of different folks on Crossroads, intersections of Blackness. So yeah, Instagram was definitely a smart route to take, but it was just a model that the street team took that anybody can take and run with.
Yeah, I think it's powerful. And I think sometimes we don't recognize our own power. That we do things, I do this all the time. Like, y'all know me, I'll invent some stuff just to invent some stuff, thinking that that's, because I thought that that's what we need to do. But you don't
Exactly.
impact that it's going to have, how long it's going to last, the power of it. And so what I liked about the Instagram was that anybody could get on, and I like the universal nature of it. Instagram you can get on. I also love that because Instagram skews young, if you share it on your friends, another young person's going to see it. Like it has its own spreading that doesn't involve any of the adults. Like I've shared a breaking bread post before and didn't get no likes or no comments or nothing. But when y'all do it, it's like bing. So I think that there's just something for the community of youth development professionals to think about how you're leveraging social media rather than kind of banning social media. Schools get into the position again. We talk about how systems in schools are replicated in our programs. So because schools ban Instagram or schools ban social media, then our program is like, turn your phone off. But for me, I can't imagine, I'm 51, so I can't imagine going to school with a computer in my pocket like that to me. And then have somebody tell me don't use it is just like ridiculous to me, because they used to say, go use the dictionary, but don't look at your phone, which is just crazy. So yeah, I just really appreciate, the use of new media, the use of new mediums to do what Chris said, and what you said, not reinvent the wheel, but actually take the wheel and put it into these new machines, which is just powerful. We didn't have a lot of time to talk about this. I really want to get to the questions that folks are bringing in.
Before you do that, this question is directly connected to social media.
Oh, okay, go.
What do you think about Instagram shadow banning certain radical, quote unquote, radical posts? And do you know any tips of how to resist censorship to keep spreading knowledge like this?
Well, that on that last question, that's something that we're all still learning. But in terms of discussing Blackness, in terms of discussing how we unite as a community, those are always going to be looked at as radical subjects in terms of those who are censoring and controlling the media airwaves. So I feel like that's always a battle that we have to fight, but we're definitely still looking for the solutions on how to stop getting stuff pulled down. If it's definitely about and it was way more towards the protests when we kind of were experiencing that, getting things pulled down, things not posting and things like that. I do not have any solutions, but yeah, I definitely recommend yeah, creating more accounts, continuing the conversation. Yeah, it's definitely a great place to host those type of conversations, regardless of if they're getting pulled down or not.
Yeah, I mean, my advice for that is get another page and post it again. Like, I'm going to say that when I was working at Youth Speaks, we had poems that we put on YouTube, and we didn't really know what we were doing. We just put poems on YouTube, and we thought this was somehow going to become an archive of story. And we had comments, and people would like use the comment section to drag those poems or those poets into the ground. So we just eliminated comments and then dumped thousands of poems onto YouTube, so that it's uncontrollable. Nobody can stop that. It's like it gets shared by people I've never met and will never see. So part of distributing freedom is what that is. This is distributed freedom. So you've got to master the machine that you're using in order to distribute freedom. And that's like a whole, we should just have a educating the Black child that's just about technology. I've got somebody in mind for that. Let's talk a little bit about these books real quick, just for a moment, because I don't want to leave it in the like, we ride social media, we make music videos, and we work in schools. Like, no, there's scholars that are involved in forming this every step of the way. And it's important to remember that the scholarship, the research, the study that's happening, that this is not fly-by-night ideas about how to help Black children, but this is like verified, qualified, and the ideation comes, and then the research comes to find out whether or not it's valid or structured or strong. And so this book, Black Sunrise, really captures the work of African-American male achievement. Dr. Vajra Watson worked closely, did a lot of ethnographic research and interviews, et cetera, and worked closely with AAMA to produce this book. So you can, Black Sunrise is one that you can look for to get more about the history of what happened in Oakland, and also about the interventions that were used by AAMA. And then We Dare Say Love, supporting achievement in the educational life of Black boys. Chris Chatmon was one of the editors, along with two dynamic scholars, Dr. Naila Saud Nasir and Dr. Jarvis Gibbons, who are both preeminent scholars especially in the study of Black people and Black education. And I just wanted to highlight that. And if you can find these books, you can even get more insight into this kind of the scholarship side, but also the personal narratives of people who've experienced both AAMA and the work that's being carried on by kingmakers. And you see in the book, it's got a afterword by Tyrone Howard and by Pedro Noguera, which again, just lend more scholastic credence to the power of this work, that this work is not something that's specific to Oakland or specific to Bay Area, but it's something that actually can be carried out all over the United States and maybe even in places overseas. I don't know if you want to say anything about that, Chris, as we go into these questions.
You just said it, but I think it's something that we don't. When we launched in 2010, again, systems of oppression self-correct, and we need to account for this in any time we lean in. And people were saying, "What you're doing? Where's the research? And so, for me, we had to. Well, it was multiple things. One, substantiate the impact of what we're doing. And so as we were designing, we had researchers embedded from the beginning. The other book is Transformative Schooling too. And part of it, and now they influence the field, where Seattle Public Schools, their book that they read and are getting trained on is where we Dare Say Love. But then other districts and other folks can substantiate African-centered pedagogy, and there's other folks that are doing it. But from basically legitimized our strategy. And so for us, though, it took us from just being kind of a niche or just that we were coming in for a temporary standpoint, the research and then the publication and the codification, now this stuff will live in perpetuity and people can leverage our work that we did in Oakland and push it in other places. And so it's something that we shouldn't, again, whoever controls the narrative has the power. And if we aren't writing, and if we aren't driving the research, if we aren't writing the narrative, or if we aren't capturing this, then the next generation who can speak for themselves, it'll be harder for them to improvise because they don't have the same sheet music. And so for us, we were building off of other texts, yet it was important for us to contextualize what we learned from the past in the now. And so now it's also, our work can live in perpetuity and people can leverage it, as it may come and go even in Oakland, although it's still going. But it was a strategy as well to actually engage researchers to codify and substantiate the work, not just for Oakland, but for the movement.
Yeah, I think that's critically important. I also think the message that I hope folks are getting in this webinar is just the power of narrative shift, the power of photographs, the power of media, the power of art to challenge these narratives. How you remix these machines, these systems that have been designed to isolate individual voice, and you can actually jack these systems to mobilize collective voice. And Instagram is one of those systems, but the use of film, the use of music, the use of these kinds of forums, just really critical in kind of getting beyond the quote unquote official narratives and the official organs.
That's right.
And then by using these other narratives, an official organ becomes available. So you use on all these other platforms, and then boom, I get a research book. Just to think about how you can leverage these things for the achievement of the mission within your own organization. Khalil, last question for you is about Upset the Setup 2, change in motion. What you got for us, man? What's going on?
Yeah, so Upset the Setup 2, change in motion is the part 2 to our revolutionary conversation. Really, this is our step in building community in the age of coronavirus and on the quarantine. So really, this is our stay-at-home version of, say, a Man Up conference or whatever our remix of that would be. So yeah, this is building community, really wanting to organize and listen to our young people, providing resources, providing support and access to other organizations that are doing good work, and bring it just bring a community together. We realized in our first Upset the Setup that a lot of youth that are coming from areas we didn't necessarily predict have never experienced a space where they were actually able to talk about Blackness, talk about their self and their experiences, and also to build and ask questions about what to do. Realize that there's aid funds, there's GoFundMe's, there's way we can support each other, and that we are not alone, isolated in areas like Orange County or up north in places like Eureka and Humboldt, where there's brothers and sisters who, you know what I'm saying, feel lonely, feel few and far between. So this is just showing that we're there for our folks. Any youth who are out there who need that support, who need that community, we're definitely there to build, to listen, but also to organize and be revolutionary as well.
So for those of y'all on this webinar, this Black Youth Forum, coordinated by youth, led by youth, for youth, conversations with youth. If you have young people who would benefit from being in this conversation, hit this Eventbrite, type that into your own computer, get them a ticket, but it's important that young people talk to other young people, and that it's not always adult driven, that there's spaces for youth to find voice among other youth, to find support, solutions that are internal within the community. That's what future orientation is really about. Questions, Candace, questions. I know we're running late on time.
Very late on time, but it's okay. Quick question is, how can we volunteer since we are in a pandemic? And do we have Queenmaker programs that folks can volunteer to be a part of as well?
Well, in San Francisco, actually, the work there's a focus on Black just Black youth in general. So definitely supporting Ali, African American Academic Leadership Initiative. So that we work with San Francisco, and so it's boys, girls, gender neutral youth, and within that context, within volunteering with Kingmakers of Oakland, go to our kingmakersofoakland.org website. We do a multiplicity of things. We actually had a forum called The Lab, where leveraging technology to address racial equity issues, and it was all BIPOC youth. That's something we had 189 youth from 18 different states, all designed for. We had from artificial intelligence to all these different domains that young people are interested in, and it was young folk of color who are in that industry, kind of teaching them, showing them. So there's multiple volunteer opportunities, but in terms of our Queens, Oakland Unified School District has African American female excellence. We're not, in terms of direct service, really it's the street team, and then we convene. We don't necessarily do direct service programs per se, but we work with districts to support them. So the districts in the Bay that are doing some good work around Black male and female achievement, I would look to San Francisco and Oakland. In San Francisco, Bobby Pope is a key leader within the district that's in that department. And in Oakland, Brother Jerome Gordine, Brother Taji, Sister Amina leads the African American Female Excellence Initiative. If you're really interested in specific work around Black girls, those two districts, you definitely tap into them.
Excellent.
All right, so that is a wrap. I know folks have to hop off and go to their programs, but thank you all for showing up. Thank you to our guests, Chris Chatmon and Khalil Chatmon. What's up, Khalil? So if you want to know more about us, edutainmentforequity.com. We also have an offering. So you will all be getting a link to a free book by Dr. Maisha Wynn. Dr. Maisha, formerly Dr. Maisha Fisher. You'll get a link to this book for free. It's called Black Literate Lives. That'll be in your email. And we want to, again, shout out our sponsor, the Department of Children, Youth, and Their Families.